May 16th, 1992, one of the worst gruesome homicide murders happened in Spencer, Oklahoma, at 11315 Northeast 50th Street. One of the most gruesome murders or homicide murders in Oklahoma history. On that fateful day, 5 black women were slain, stabbed to death, and murdered at that address. The women were found completely naked, without clothing, blood everywhere, and all of the women were stabbed multiple times. It was a monstrous case. The police investigated and found no evidence at the scene, very little to none. The only thing they found was a palm print on the wall of the killer. They also found some small DNA, but that's it. There were so many people in the community worried because the killer was obviously still out there. I remember this story very well because I was a young woman in Oklahoma City when it happened. And I remember so many rumors swirling about this incident that, you know, people were saying that the women's bodies were dismembered. People were saying that there was a professional hitman, and that's why the police had no leads. People were saying that, all types of crazy rumors swirling about this case. I remember that, the case so well because one of the young ladies that died, grandmother, lived across the street from my grandmother. And I would stay over my grandmother's house so often. I was always at my grandmother's house because my parents were working hard. And her grandmother's name was Miss Stevenson. That's what we called her. And it's just so sad that Miss Stevenson lost her granddaughter in that horrible, tragic event. But the police investigated and found out that all the women, except for one that they knew of, was on drugs. So basically, what they found out during their investigation was all the women were smoking crack. They were addicted to crack. And that the house at 11315 Northeast 50th Street was used as a place where the women could sell their bodies for drugs. The house belonged to Sandra Thompson. She lived in the house. The ladies that were there were all friends of Sandra Thompson. They were all raped and stabbed to death. This case went unsolved for 5 years. So you can imagine how the members of the community felt. They were tormented. They were horrified. They were afraid for their lives because the killer was still out there. However, they did find that the women did fight back. There was evidence that the women fought the killer. And they just didn't understand how the killer was able to kill all 5 of them with just a knife. The women that were killed May 16th, 1992 was Sandra Thompson, the owner of the home, Phyllis Adams. Sandra was 35, by the way. Phyllis Adams was 47. LaShawn Evans was 30. Carolyn Watson was 37. And Francine Roberts was 34. All 5 of these women passed away in that house on May 16th by an unknown killer and then terrorized the community. The women were actually stabbed 40 to 50 times each. So I make it sound pretty light when I'm telling the story, but they were actually stabbed 40 to 50 times each. Of course, my family talked about it because my grandmother lived across the street from the woman who passed, Sandra Thompson's grandmother. And it hit pretty close to home in that way. But just the rumors that were swirling, some people were saying that their body parts were dismembered in the house, and people were, assuming that it was a professional hitman because there was no evidence left. There was no evidence to go by. The only thing or only evidence they had were DNA samples from the rape that occurred when the women were raped. There was a rape case in 1997, something that was seemingly unrelated to this case. A man was brought in for that rape by the name of Danny Keith Hooks. When they tested Hooks' DNA, it matched the DNA from the murder in 1992 with the 5 women. So that's how they caught the killer. Another rape. And it placed Hooks at the incident of that murder. And it was found out that Hooks had brutally murdered all 5 women. His testimony was that he went over that day, May 16, 1992, to party with the women. He went to smoke crack with them. He went to have sex with them. And then he said he left and went back home because he spent all of his money. Although he said he returned the next morning to find all of the women dead. And when police asked him, or when they asked him in the court, why did you go back if you spent all your money the previous day? And he simply said he went back just to check on them or something. I forgot exactly what he said. But he was given 5 consecutive life sentences and was also placed on death row. The death row conviction was overturned. It was overturned years later because the judge didn't agree. They retried him and didn't agree that he deserved the death penalty. So, as far as I know, he's still living. And those 5 women lost their lives. Sandra Thompson was renting the house from someone. So the owner of the house was never able to rent the house. Nobody wanted to live there after that incident occurred. So the house was eventually demolished. Now on Google Maps, it still shows the house, but it has since been demolished years ago. So I just wanted to come on here and tell this story. I know it's a pretty dramatic story, guys. I just wanted to tell it just to say, if you guys are out in the streets doing anything illegal, get you some protection jewelry. If you're not doing anything wrong and you're living right, you still may want to invest in some protection jewelry. All the time they were looking for that killer, and he lived a few blocks down from where those women were killed. If you guys are going to be selling dope in the street, if you're going to be doing illegal activities, if you are going to be committing any type of crimes, you might want to invest in some protection jewelry. Something that will help you stay protected while you're doing your street shit. Nobody's here to judge anybody. Nobody's here to tell people what they should and shouldn't do. Everybody's going to do whatever they want to do at the end of the day. But if you're going to be in the streets doing illegal activity, if you're going to be selling dope, if you're going to be doing anything like that, invest in your protection. And so I hope you guys enjoy the story and have a great night.